Hello and welcome to the December edition of the Dot Report. As it gets colder here in the Midwest, the cybersecurity space continues to heat up. And in our final report of 2025, we're going to cover a pair of security issues that Google is actively working to address, a group of highly sophisticated phishing kits that have hit the market, and a series of leaks from a mercenary spyware firm known as Intellexa. Before we get into our stories this month, though, make sure to check out even more news covered in our podcast version of the Dot Report on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. Now, let's put a bow on 2025 and jump right in. Google is once again working to patch active vulnerabilities focused on disabling an actively exploited zero-day threat in the Chrome browser that attackers were already using in the wild. Early this month, Google confirmed that a high-severity vulnerability inside Chrome's graphics engine was being abused before a patch was available. The flaw sits in Angle, Chrome's almost native graphics layer engine, which is a core component responsible for translating graphics instructions across platforms. That makes it especially dangerous. If an attacker can control that layer, they can corrupt memory and potentially execute arbitrary code just by getting a victim to load a malicious page. Google did move quickly, pushing emergency updates across Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, but as usual with in-the-wild exploitation, details were deliberately scarce. No attribution, no targeting information, and no clarity on how widespread these attacks actually were. But that silence is deliberate. It buys time for users to patch before attackers reverse engineer the fix and scale exploitation. The vulnerability was even serious enough to land on CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, which triggers mandatory patching timelines for federal agencies. And while the vulnerability was in the Chrome graphics engine specifically, the impact reaches far beyond that because Chrome also underpins other browsers like Edge, Brave, and Opera, meaning a flaw in its rendering pipeline becomes a shared liability across multiple browsers. One exploit with millions of potential endpoints. Security flaw found in the graphics rendering engine wasn't Google's only trouble this month either. Researchers at Elastic Security Labs uncovered a new Windows backdoor dubbed Nanoremote that uses the Google Drive API as its command and control channel, a tactic designed to blend malicious traffic with legitimate cloud communications. Nanoremote's operation begins with a loader component called WM Loader, which masquerades as a legitimate crash handler for Bitdefender, but once executed, it decrypts a shellcode payload that launches the backdoor, connecting back to the operators. What sets this malware apart is how it uses a legit cloud service, Google Drive's API, to transmit commands and exfiltrate data. Rather than connecting directly to an obviously malicious server, Nanoremote queues upload and download tasks via the Drive API, often pausing, resuming, or canceling transfers in ways that are designed to mimic normal cloud traffic. Inside the implant, a suite of 22 command handles allow the attacker to gather host information, run arbitrary files, and even manipulate directories and manage file transfers. Making matters worse, the data is moved through encrypted JSON transactions, which creates difficulties for defenders in distinguishing malware traffic from everyday cloud synchronization. Another note to make on the Nanoremote malware is its resemblance to Final Draft, which is also known as Squiddoor, but uses the Microsoft Graph API in a very similar cyber attack. The two malware strains actually share identical development artifacts, including encryption keys and code functions, which suggests a common threat actor, or at the very least, a common code base. And by piggybacking on a ubiquitous service like Google Drive, Nanoremote is able to mask its malicious traffic and evade many network-based detection tools that would normally flag connections to unfamiliar or suspicious endpoints. When attackers hide in plain sight like this, traditional perimeter defenses struggle to differentiate benign from malicious activity. Next up, a group of 4 highly sophisticated phishing kits surfaced this month that are redefining how cybercriminals approach credential theft. 4 distinct toolkits known as Black Force, Ghostframe, Inbox Prime AI, and Spider-Man have been observed in active campaigns that combine advanced evasion, AI automation, and multi-factor authentication bypass techniques. One of the most aggressive of these is Black Force. First identified back in August, the Black Force phishing kit is more than a simple credential harvester, as it includes man-in-the-browser functionality that captures one-time passwords and MFA tokens in real time. By filtering out security scanners and bot crawlers before servicing phishing pages, Black Force increases the odds that only real human victims are exposed. And it's been found mimicking over a dozen global brands, from Disney to Netflix to DHL and UPS. A second toolkit, known as Ghost Frame, takes a different approach by loading a believable outer page that embeds a malicious iframe. That iframe then ultimately delivers a phishing login experience that's extremely difficult for automated defenses to block. This clever design allows attackers to swap out phishing content on the fly without touching the public-facing page. Then there's Inbox Prime AI, a phishing kit that leverages generative AI for both persuasion and automation. Attackers can configure language for industry, context, tone, and even length, and the toolkit will generate personalized lures at scale. This removes one of the biggest bottlenecks in traditional phishing, which is crafting convincing, varied email content. With built-in spam analysis and sender identity randomization, campaigns powered by Inbox Prime AI can bypass signature-based filters by making each message look fresh and unique. Finally, the Spider-Man kit has carved out a niche in financial fraud because it's particularly effective in European banking credential theft. Making use of tactics like session hijacking, OTP capture, and advanced logging, all of which give attackers continuity throughout a multi-stage attack cycle. The Spider-Man phishing kit even captures seed phrases, authentication challenges, and credit card prompts, creating a full picture of credentials rather than just yielding a static username and password. Together, these kits represent a significant evolution in phishing as a service. They're modular, AI-enhanced, and capable of bypassing multiple layers of modern defenses. Finally, this month, a series of leaks from within Intellexa, a mercenary spyware firm, have pulled back the curtain on how some of the most invasive mobile surveillance tools are built and delivered. The leaked documents, internal training videos, and marketing materials shared with journalists and researchers shed new light on the company's use of zero-day exploits, malvertising delivery, and multi-stage exploitation frameworks. One of the most striking revelations is the range of bugs Intellexa's tooling has relied on. From previously undisclosed iOS and Android flaws to browser vulnerabilities in Safari and Chrome that enable initial access. In documented cases, the spyware chain begins with a crafted malicious link sent via messaging apps like WhatsApp. But when opened, the link triggers an exploit that subverts the browser sandbox and loads Predator's payload onto the device. The spyware itself is capable of harvesting messaging content, call logs, location data, passwords, and even capturing audio and photo using the device's hardware, all exfiltrated to servers controlled by the operator. These leaks also describe delivery vectors that go beyond one-click links. One such mechanism, dubbed Aladdin, abuses the mobile advertising ecosystem to deliver zero-click infections. In other words, malicious ads that compromise mobile devices by simply being displayed, no user interaction required. But perhaps most concerning to researchers was evidence suggesting that Intellexa personnel may have had direct access to the surveillance systems of some of its government clients, allowing them to view target data and operational logs. That raises some profound questions about privacy, oversight, and human rights protections. That's it for this month, so as always, thank you for watching, and remember, if you want more news from the Dot Report, you can hear these stories plus an additional 4 covered in our podcast report on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. Remember, browse safe out there. I'm Andrew Mancini with Dot Security, and this has been the Dot Report. Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2026.